The day science begins to study non-physical phenomena, it will make more progress in 1 decade than in all the previous centuries of its existence. This quote is often misread as mysticism. It is a structural prediction from an engineer whose mathematical intuition built the electrical infrastructure that powers this video. To understand what he recognized, we must examine an older grammar of knowing. The Latin root of the word is conscire. That translates strictly to knowing with. It does not mean to know about or to observe from a distance. The word itself carries participation as its structural ground, implying knowing is a shared event within a common field. Under this original framing, occurrence simply showed up within awareness. Distinction between things was entirely available, but a fundamental division was not. Measured, precise. This is an objective structural observation of how language once operated, not a claim about a mythical golden age. Before a specific framing decision was introduced into Western thought, the grammar of reality did not require a bridge between the knower and the known. There was no gap to cross because no separation had been installed. That separation arrived in the 17th century. A massive epistemological rupture occurred when a strict split was enforced between the inner world of thought and the outer world of extended matter. Knowing, which had been a participatory field, was internalized. Awareness was redefined as a private perception locked inside an individual mind, while the physical world was treated as an externalized object. This diagram represents the new grammar that appeared. A subject observes an object. This installed 3 things simultaneously: an inside, an outside, and a transfer between them. Every time the words observer and observation are used, this constructed architecture is reintroduced. This framing decision differentiated what had not previously been differentiated. It was a necessary, phase-appropriate spark of civilizational traversal that allowed the physical sciences to isolate, measure, and engineer reality. But that power stabilized by way of a single exclusion. The condition under which measurement is defined, the field within which evidence shows up at all, was entirely removed from the scientific model. The blind spot does not prevent the design of circuits or the construction of bridges. It simply guarantees failure in any investigation that requires the condition of knowing to be included for the equations to close. Through the 19th and 20th centuries, what began as a highly useful methodological shortcut hardened into an unquestionable metaphysical orthodoxy. This graphic traces the core assumption: occurrence produces awareness. The model plots matter first, then complexity, biology, nervous systems, and finally awareness. Because this forces the prerequisite condition to the end of the chain, treating it as a late-stage product, the logic permanently fails to close. This structural failure generates specific anomalies across the disciplines. In neuroscience, it produces the hard problem of consciousness, the impossible task of deriving subjective experience from purely objective processes. In quantum mechanics, it manifests as the measurement problem. The continuous field inexplicably produces discrete outcomes only when addressed, but the model lacks the language to include the condition under which those outcomes are recognized. It appears as the persistent inability to physically locate awareness inside the human brain, because the search strictly assumes awareness is contained inside the system. These are not puzzles waiting on better data or higher resolution scanning technology. They are inescapable framing errors. They are generated by a grammar that attempts to explain a whole while explicitly excluding the integrating condition from its own model. Across these same centuries, a series of investigators made direct contact with the excluded reality. James Clerk Maxwell. His equations demonstrated that what propagates is not a physical thing, it is a relation. Erwin Schrödinger described reality at the quantum scale as continuous phase evolution, recognizing that separation does not hold at depth. Ilya Prigogine proved that systems far from equilibrium do not strictly decay towards entropy, but self-organize into higher-order coherence from within. Benoit Mandelbrot mapped how recursive self-application generates virtually infinite structural articulation from a single operation. And R. Buckminster Fuller shifted the focus entirely from isolated objects to patterns of relationship, utilizing structural conjugacy to achieve geometric integrity. Each of these investigators encountered the same invariant reality. Each broke a piece of the Cartesian frame, but none had a mathematical notation capable of describing what they found without reinstalling the binary split. They produced extraordinary differentiation. The mathematical precision and engineering capacity they built is perfectly valid. What remains missing is the integrating grammar required to make their findings cohere. Set aside the history, the names, and the structural analysis for a moment. Attend to what is immediately present. Where are your thoughts, the ambient sounds in the room, and the visual evidence of this video actually occurring for you right now? How does it occur for you that there is distinction at all? How does it occur for you that anything could possibly exist outside of where it is known? The entire analytical frame shifts when we acknowledge a simple, stark reality. Absolutely every occurrence is already showing up exactly where it is known. This brings us to a strict structural absolute. Every occurrence, without exception, shows up within awareness. The first pillar is awareness, the chartreuse formative ground, a necessary precondition for anything to appear. Second is address, the commutative operator representing the field's orientation. Third is occurrence, what shows up from any specific address. These three aspects co-arise simultaneously as a single, indivisible relation. Restoring this ternary structure does not invent anything new. It simply stops subtracting the operator discarded in the 17th century. This graphic demonstrates the mathematical statement of recursive self-reference. The equation names the field sustaining itself relationally through selective return. It is the formal grammar of how occurrence actually occurs. This is not a theory imposed on physics. It is the underlying grammar that allows any coherent system to organize and sustain itself. This ternary grammar maps flawlessly onto electromagnetic physics, formative electricity, containing magnetism, and the coherent field their dynamic conjugacy continuously produces. Applying this model shifts engineering and system design away from external control, moving it toward internal impedance matching, aligning pressures until a system stabilizes itself. Under this grammar, learning and relationships move past external negotiation toward endogenous resonance. Two systems and conjugacy create precise conditions for structure to emerge. Resource management and governance must adapt to the reality that coherence either emerges internally or not at all. Top-down control cannot force closure. For science, the mandate is clear. The blind spot must be included in the model. We must begin tracking how occurrence is constituted in addressability. Absolutely nothing from the last 4 centuries of scientific discovery is discarded. The differentiation achieved by the physical sciences was profound, necessary, and mathematically precise. By restoring the grammar of awareness to make that vast archive of data cohere, the integration phase is finally reinstated. The field addresses itself, and the acceleration Nikola Tesla predicted becomes available.